the reason why people blog, the reason why people express themselves and demonstrate is always because they have something that they want to communicate, which isn't being communicated. So yes, the answer must be yes. Let me just say one more thing about this. I don't know Greece, but I'm going to go out on a limb. Like the United States. In the United States, and I suspect in Greece, if you were to sit and talk with a cab driver, average working person, any average working person, about sports, you would find a incredible wealth of knowledge. Not everybody, but lots and lots of people, the people who are fans, an incredible wealth of knowledge. And it isn't just factual knowledge. It is that. That is, we have the warehouse of factual information that's critical to being able to have a judgment. But it's also knowledge of the dynamics of the sport, the variables that are involved in one team winning and another losing, the strategies that are involved. And if you listen to people talk, at least in the United States, if you listen, go into a bar and you listen to, to working class folks, now it's women as well as men who are into sports, talk about sports, you discern there's a level of background knowledge, of sophisticated understanding of the theory of the sport, and of strategic thinking that dwarfs, and I mean this seriously, that dwarfs what leftists display is as both goal and strategic and background knowledge about most of the projects that we undertake. It is higher, I think, than what most professionals have in their discipline. So in other words, if you talk to professionals in many, many disciplines, there's a lot of knowledge, but there is not much ability to create a coherent argument, to actually understand what it means to marshal evidence and logic to a claim. Right? Working people can do that exceptionally well about sports, right? About that one domain which is left free for them to exercise their capacities and their abilities on. And they do it. And they can do it. So the interesting thing here is that the jump is not as big as it seems. It isn't that the 80% sort of don't have the neurons to think strategically. That's nonsense, right? Not only that, they even have practice at it in this particular domain, right? What they don't have is the inclination or the belief that there is any point whatsoever regarding the world of social relations the way they regard the world of sports, as a serious domain in which real things are at stake and in which you can think about things with evidence and logic, and you can develop strategies and you can pursue them. If people felt that, we would instantly be in position to have a participatory movement. So while I said all those things about the need to facilitate and to pursue and to everything else participation, and I do believe all that, it's not as bad as it looks, because there is this underlying capacity that masses and masses of people have and exercise, right, to think strategically, to use logic and evidence, to be able to participate. They participate in sports discussions, right? Now we have to have them participate in discussions of what's going to happen in history, what our lives are going to be like. I suspect that it would be easier for most working people to become full participants in an open party than most doctors, lawyers, engineers, psychiatrists, psychologists, high-end professionals, etc., etc. Because I think that, in fact, the professionals have had a tremendous amount of training in ignoring evidence and ignoring facts, in making claims that are false, demonstrably false, right? In other words, working people are more scientific, more rational than the highly knowledgeable folks, right? So That's good. That means that our movement isn't necessarily dominated by the latter, by the highly knowledgeable folks. The minute we can get people to have confidence, the minute we can get people to understand that they are better prepared, that they are able to run the show, that they are able to make the decisions. So it's a, I don't want to minimize the difficulties and the obstacles to overcome to get real participation, but it is possible. It is more than possible. It is even likely once there's momentum, once the stickiness problem and the vision problem are dealt with. In a country like the United States, 2% roughly of the population is what we call capitalists. Right? Those are the people who own the country. They don't own my shirt. They own all the corporations, all the companies that produce stuff, or nearly all. Then there's about 20%. And the 20% is, I call them the coordinator class. What I mean by that is they are people who work, who have jobs, but what they do is empowering. What they do is have a different character than what the 80% below them do. The 80% do rote, tedious, redundant, repetitive work overwhelmingly. Work that is debilitating, work that is not empowering, work that does not inspire, convey information. And they are subordinate. They take orders. The 20% has a considerable amount, often a tremendous amount of say and even control over their own circumstances and over the circumstances of the people below. So the 20% includes doctors, lawyers, engineers, etc., people called professionals, various things. I want to say it includes people who have a relative monopoly on empowering work. The capitalists have a relative monopoly on productive property. They own the productive property. The coordinator class, the 20%, right, own or have a relative monopoly on empowering circumstances, empowering tasks, empowering work. They monopolize that. They hold that. The 80% or 78%, whatever, are left with the rote and the repetitive work, the disempowering work. Okay, so when we talk about average folks participating, what do we mean? Right now, the 2% participates. The 2% is involved in deciding what this country and other countries around the world do. They are the people who, right? The 20% significantly participates. Still, the 20% also is significantly involved. Not all of them, some people don't. It's in the 80% that you have tons of people who don't participate. So take the United States presidential elections. Typically, half the country votes. Who is that? Well, the 2% is sure as hell voting. The 20%, not everybody in the 20% is voting, but most people in the 20% are voting. So what you've got is all those people voting, and then out of the 80%, maybe 30%, 3/8, right, are voting, something like that. And the rest are not. So when we talk about participation or increasing participation, what we would be talking about is people who are in the working class, right, participating, people who are poor, people who are, right, or pretty well off working class people, organized work, but working class people. Those people participating, that's where any increase is going to come from. Is that desirable? Of course it's desirable. Why is it desirable? Well, because society is organized to hurt them. And the more they participate, the more they express their will and their desires, the more pressure there is for society to, in the short run, behave better, serve their interests better, and in the long run, change so that it becomes a society in which we don't have that hierarchy. So the answer is yes, participation is critical. There are all sorts of reasons why it's critical in any formulation that we can come up with. If you take a workplace, particular workplace, if you've got the workplace designed in such a way that only 2% or 5% or 20% are participating in decision making and the rest are obeying, you have a class structure, you have a division, you have taken that workplace and divided it in such a way that these people are different from each other. Some are decision makers. Some are obedient. And outside the workplace, they will continue to operate in those veins. And so, if we want a society in which people are people, instead of some being rulers and some ruled, then we have to have more generalized participation. And that means we have to have the conditions for more generalized participation.